Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Love Fruit podcast. And remember, if you want to follow us, you can go to fruitfest.co.uk to follow our newsletter there and get updated about future episodes. In this week's episode, we have a very special guest, and that is Viktoras Kulvinskas. And Viktoras has been known for many years as the godfather of the living foods movement. He wrote a book back in the 70s called Survival in the 21st Century, which introduced many people to the concept of eating a living foods or raw foods diet. And he and Ann Wigmore were the founders of the Ann Wigmore Institute, which turned into eventually Hippocrates, which is still going to this day and is a popular and successful raw food center in the US. And he has been teaching and sharing information about living foods around the world in his lectures. And he also runs a retreat in Costa Rica, in Montezuma, Costa Rica. So, Viktoras, is there anything else you would like to say about yourself in introduction to yourself?
As an introduction, I'm very deeply involved with the scene movement and Christianity as such, and where it laid the foundation for the living food concept that goes back 2,000 years in Qumran, where the community developed, and they were noted for consuming a diet. Practically 90% of it was from immature plants, micro-planting greens, and also sprouting, dehydration, and fermentation. So these are super living all the way to the time of consumption type of overall foods. And they were very noted for psychic development, as well as also great intellect and prophecy, as well as longevity and superior health. They provided inspiration and guidance to the world. They were noted for living, according to historian Joseph, is 400% longer than the rest of the Mediterranean, Northern Africa, or Southern Europe segment of the population. And it would have been much longer, but they ended up moving into tremendous extinction and suppression by the Roman Empire. So it was kind of temporarily terminated, but the knowledge came by way of the teachings that you find in the sacred writings that you can find it for free on it's the website entitled Nazarene, Nazareneway.com. So if you want to find out more in depth about the Holocene tradition, which is several thousand years, and Hippocrates program is very much based on holism and also the way of the scenes. So it lays a very long historical type of foundation. My own greatest contribution came in the field of enzymology, and basically the component that differentiates between living and non-living entities. And I had the good fortune of spending time with this sage and elderly gentleman, Dr. Edward Howell, who ended up meeting up with him when he was already in his 90s and I was in my 40s. And I discovered his manuscripts at Harvard Medical Library, where I put in over 3,000 hours of study of basically biological abstracts. And in those days, we didn't have computers. We're looking 50 years back. And I was able to put together the living food concept, and I found his manuscripts and found out that he was still alive. His manuscripts were entitled Food Enzymes for Influence on Metabolism and Digestive Functions. And he had over close to 600 medical journal references of research. So it laid the foundation for the living and raw foods. And basically there's a big differentiation between living and raw foods. So anyways, these are very important highlights in my life, but I started off myself as a very sick individual, but it was a great benefit because it directed my life toward pursuit of health and devoting myself to that ministry. My early studies were in theoretical mathematics. I taught college for several years and then spent quite a bit of my time in the computer industry, where it was working with some of the most important challenges at that time, both astrophysics, as well as simulation of like Apollo flight mission and many other exciting adventures. But then at 29, I dropped out and joined Ann Wigmore, who was at that time just working with exploring the biblical teachings in reference to grasses, and also just the concept of Genesis I-29. So slowly, with the two of us, pioneered, mine coming from more the scientific and hers coming from the intuitive biblical. She was a Unity Church ministry, basically trained in that field, and started with the Rising Sun Christianity and transferred it into a more little kind of a model of reflecting, which was the Hippocrates and the Health and Institute, and that became the foundation. And now, 50 years later, more or less, it has become now Hippocrates Wellness, emphasizing, the holistic way of life and what we can do by way of youthing and by way of self empowerment and self-reliance under any crisis. And we are in a state of crisis right now. So my basic emphasis has been in basically preparedness for helping people to prepare themselves for managing during times of great deal of restriction as we migrate into the Aquarian age, which is a major transformation, and it could impact the lives of many who are not prepared, because we're looking on a planet that is severely immune compromised and also extremely in a environment that is super challenging our resources, and basically how to move into more like minimalism and being able to handle whatever comes down the pike. And as you very well know, Ronnie, we're in severe challenge through the pandemic and all that. So that's where I am coming from.
Yeah, and obviously you came towards a living foods kind of diet, but what was your upbringing like? Were you brought up on an alternative diet or fairly conventional? I believe you were brought up in, is it Lithuania you come from?
That's correct. And we had a 100-acre self-sustainable farm, and basically relied on everything that was on the farm. We made our own clothing. We made my father accidentally dropped a sickle and opened up a lesion 14 inches long. My grandmother sewed me up, and I was in a coma after that due to the infection for a period of 4 weeks, and they thought I would end up dying. And that was one of my first major challenges in terms of nutritional insufficiency and creating a whole bunch of growth issues. And then I had another major challenge in Lithuania was I was basically received basically vaccination. They did incisions on my hand. The doctor gave me like 4 times the normal dosage. So I went into another coma for about 3 weeks. Again, starvation, and people didn't think I would survive. The doctors, especially, who did come, visit us, and he's apologize about the mistake. So the diet was basically an emphasis on basic high protein, which was creating a super toxic condition. And once we moved to Germany, immigration in Germany after 5 years, and then moving out of the Lithuania, which was, they had depopulation, they had going on the Jewish segment, and the violence, and we were being shot at by the American soldiers from the Air Force, from the head. The Russians were shooting at us from tanks. So I was in a very compromised, you might say, emotional environment, social environment. A lot of stress was part of my inheritance, and I didn't start, because of the shock and all the other experiences, I didn't start speaking till I was about, I don't know, 16 or so. So my background was a great deal experimenting with stillness and moving into, one would say, more the life of a mystic, and that's been pretty much my inheritance. So it was definitely I've experienced, because of poor, we didn't have any understanding. So right off, migraine headaches. By the time I was 7 years old, I would run around with my hands on my head, screaming "Galvote," which means head, head, head. I didn't know, how to express anything that I'm in pain, and received some degree of medications, but thanks God, due to the World War II, we were moved out of that environment into basically a self-reliance on basically what we can get out of the forest, out of a garden, a little bit of animal protein, and also some of the stuff we got in displaced people camp. So it was a transition. I ended up developing, just cleansing processes throughout my whole body, as we became predominantly vegan during the period of in Germany for a period of 5 years, and then we came to the bounty of America and dived in pasteurized dairy products and processed foods, and that brought on just skin conditions, asthmatic conditions, advanced arthritis, to the point where I was in excruciating pain, compromised cardiovascular system, all of these things. And by the time I was 29, I was basically an old man with lines all over my face and everything. And that's when I dropped out, and I said, I'm aging. That was when I was with one of the top computer companies in the world at that time, Phi, and I just said, I need a sabbatical to kind of catch up with my life, and so they gave me a year off, and I never went back. And I joined Ann Wigmore, and soon I discovered Harvard Medical Library. I started, just studying independently nature ways, and also the ways of science, because that's what I'm trained as a thinker. And we had good experiences with cancer at Hippocrates. And at that time, basically President Nixon was waging a war on cancer, and I saw that was not the right approach. You don't wage war. Cancer is, I thought of it as some sort of a mechanism that served an important purpose. And sure enough, after 5 years, and I discovered the function of it, that it prevented you from dying immediately from asphyxiation, because cancer only is initiated when your oxygen transport is cut down by as low as 35%, and you can't live on that kind of level. So the body creates this mechanism of sucking out, like a vacuum cleaner, the circulatory incompletely metabolized protein, which is, according to John Gaynor, showed that it interfered with oxygen transport by as much as 60%. So you have a crisis situation, and there were two mechanisms of management of this garbage in the bloodstream. One of them is discovered by German physicians, when, a 75-page published paper. So it threw it into basically storing it in the cardiovascular system, which is over 60,000 miles long within your system, moving it into basal membranes. And when that couldn't keep up, then it created the other effect, which was observed by Dr. Otto Warburger, a Nobel Prize recipient. He showed that it actually causes normal cells to mutate to cancer. So when the oxygen level drops by as low as 35%, and it happens within a matter of 24 hours. So, and these cells have according to the University of Wisconsin, they can absorb circulatory incompletely metabolized protein 20 times faster than normal cells. So it cleans up the blood, and all of a sudden oxygen transport can take place, because life is all about oxygen, enzymes, alkalinity, and all these components, including full spectrum of minerals. So I basically started developing more and more foundation that beyond what I already covered in survival. Survival was one of the first holistic books to cover the subject of living enzymatic nutrition and living foods, fruitarianism, and showed that, the possibilities, but at the same time the challenges of a fruitarian diet. And primarily it has the issues of pH balance. There's also the issues of excessive sugars because of all the hybrids that have gone through hundreds of hybrid formations to maximizing the overall sugar content. Like apple tastes more like a crab apple, small little thing, and now we have all these beautiful, delicious thousands of different varieties of apples through hybrid type of formation. And that's true of all fruits. Fruits tended to be in a way that you would find on Star Trek. There was a movie that had all these kind of hippies that landed on this planet that had all this fruit, beautiful fruit, and they dived into it, and they're all dying from acidity because the pH was so acid, and yet it all was offset by sugars. So we have basically, issues of what is really optimization of nutritional intake. So a certain amount of it is quite delightful and useful, whether it's acid food, we can handle up to 20% of it in our diet, but before it starts compromising our energy system, as well as also certain volumes of sugar before it starts again compromising our glucose and insulin mechanisms, which ended up again leading to some degree of compromise. So properly managed, we can do very well on any kind of overall dietary intake, even as a severely compromised as, like protein as an example. They consider at least 5 grams of protein as is far from adequate. The longevity studies that are done, we're looking at 35 grams essential, but they did a study of Papua New Guinea's people who are living on less than 5 grams of protein per day, and they found that they were thriving. And when they did complete thorough evaluation, this was Dr. Oolong and Huxley, of their nutritional profile was all high fiber, primarily diet, consuming over 1,000 different variant plants that appeared during the season that were edible during the yearly rotation of crops, wild crafted crops. So basically they found it was microbial cultures that thrived and on this dietary intake, and produced over 30 grams of protein by way of amino acids and enzymes that took care of your nutritional requirements. And now there's an excellent book written by basically a Russian gastroenterologist entitled, his name is Dr. Will Bolshevitz, and it's entitled Fiber Fuel. It's like one of the important classic books on nutrition, and he's endorsing not only vegan but also raw, and also emphasizing, and this is the greatest emphasis that you can have, is on basically the probiotic approach toward evaluating what is going to be a successful nutritional diet. There's an excellent book, Megatrends, 10 New Directions, that was written in the previous century. And the author, Dr. John Nesbitt, he stated that in the field of biology, the greatest hope and expectation in the field of biology is from fermentation, which is microbial activity, and enzymology. He says they will have an influence 100 times higher than the influence of all the science, chemistry, and biology of the previous century. And it's showing to be truism, because if you look at the scientific literature right now, every journal has at least, as of 2002, basically articles on microbial cultures to the point where they're using it. That's not my way, of course, but fecal transplants, and they're getting with 94% success of recovery with all forms of degenerative diseases. But as Dr. Bolshevik states over this, that's a short-term recovery, and it's not the ultimate solution. Is go into your dietary approach and lifestyle. Everything comes down to holistic lifestyles, and that's the thing that I emphasize, and especially the emotional component, which is something that I had to deal with. I mean, I had bleeding ulcers, from the emotional dilemma, as well as I've been I was for 15 years bulimic, primarily because that was the way of suppressing my emotional stuff that was coming to the surface. And emotions are, of my dysfunctional life that was of childhood, that was never processed and was suppressed. And there's an excellent book. It's called Molecules of Emotions, written by Candace Pert. She's written over 250 research papers, and she's one of the most brilliant in psychology, and shows that every emotion is a molecule, and when your system gets saturated with all the fear and stress and all that stuff that would have been happening in my life of childhood, and the trauma that I experienced as a result, when I went into cleansing and detoxification, I would start bringing that stuff to surface. I didn't understand any of these mechanisms. I'm talking from a guy who's 83 years old, who has reflected, studied. Well, it's only been in the last 4 years that I've been absolutely into total health, you might say happiness and bliss, because I've worked through so many emotional kind of stuff and cleaned that stuff out through mindfulness and consciousness work, through meditation. And basically when you're in a state of meditation or even activity, but meditation is basically when you go into zero state of sensory data input, or super saturation, when through exercise itself can be an effective way of de-stressing and detoxifying your emotional plane. But it's got to be constant and consistent, and they've shown with research, like you can take a brain pattern of an individual who's totally stressed out, dysfunctional, and incapable of managing their life effectively, to the point where they need some kind of intervention. Yet you put them on a treadmill or just any other kind of cardiovascular challenge, and within a short period of time, 5 minutes, you see the brain patterns start changing, and within 30 minutes they look like that of a healthy, happy, well-adjusted type of individual, if there's such a one exists. And but it lasts only for about 3 hours or 4 hours, and then you got to do a repeat. The whole thing is to wipe it out, and your immune system. Well, I'm not going to, it's just, I dived into how the whole brain functions. I dived into how the emotions, the chakra systems function. I mean, all these things are just exciting adventures that enables you now all of a sudden to function on basically on the level of be still and know I am God, because this is the ultimate reality. Is the whole universe is of quantum nature, and in the sense that it represents basically all is one type of a consolement, a type of a concept of divine nature, that we are all humans, you might say humanoids, they basically gods in drag, and you become at one with the godlike features. And it says in biblical sense, we are all made in the image of the Creator, and the Creator is all powerful, all knowing, almighty, etc. And the place where you enter that is shown and if you practice it, you'll discover the attributes of at one meant to all total knowledge, at one meant to all total power, healing, and everything. And right now, one of the great chiropractors you might have heard of, Dr. Joe Dispenza, he's actually breaking down the whole subject of miracles and into basically a system that a lot of individuals are developing, and it's all dealing with consciousness and meditation and stillness. So it's pretty exciting. Be still and know I am God. It's something that has been a background for all my inner work and study. And nutrition has been just one aspect. I've been trained as a theoretical mathematician, and basically all we did was think about nothing. In a state of stillness, you end up knowing all. So many of my dissertations were often practicing mindlessness and going into a trance and downloading the information, for this process. But this is something that, and it's been a life of basically cleansing, detoxification, and also experimentation. And so much of me has been in a process of discovery and how to help people to migrate from their condition of addiction, because majority of the people are in a very addictive level. On whether you're looking emotional, and pain is very addictive, and and that's who I am. People identify with that, or all kind of lifestyle issues, whether you're looking at porno, you're looking at gambling, you're looking at addiction to booze, addiction to drugs. I mean, everybody's numbing themselves because they can't stand reality. And that's the whole gig, is to get into experiencing the beauty. Reality is so beautiful when your imagination is fully lit up and you're on fire by moving that energy field around within your chakra system. Life is all of a sudden you're experiencing bliss, and making a transition from traditional intimacy into, instead of, with my research shows, like I mean, men and women, as example, women, it's totally devastating into moves them into aging, accelerated aging process is the menstruation. It's totally unnatural, unhealthy, and it's a process that has come about because of the dietary overall choices. And with men, the ejaculation is totally unnecessary in order to experience not only multiple orgasms, but at the same time experience joy, bliss, and stop the aging process. Aging is, when you're bleeding your hormones out of your system, and basically out of your creativity channels, and you start moving into stupidity through the impact of spilling out all these phosphate derivatives that are so essential. I mean, every ejaculation, you're losing 5 grams of protein. And that's totally insane, to go through that. Instead, if you want to have bliss, orgasmic, and at the same time being able to move into a higher state of consciousness, these are attributes that it's not for everybody with training. And this training is not very overall difficult. And there's a great teacher, and there's right now many you can find, but basically it's Mantak Chia on his Tantra situation. But these are, basic whole systems of integration and learning how to enjoy the beauty of the human experience and why you're here. Most people are totally ignorant about who they are. Why are they here on planet Earth? To them, it's basically a numbing experience of pain and suffering and getting stuck on the lower 3 chakras, which is basically root chakra, and then also sensuality and power tripping in order to maintain and to keep numbing yourself and create the most polluted planet on Earth instead of the beautiful planet. Like you go back to prehistoric time. I'm not talking about pre-USA invasion by the hordes of Europe that totally destroyed the beautiful kind of lifestyles that was existent in nature, and basically, and now U.S. even United Nations says unless we return back to nature, there's no future for humanity, and we're far from returning back to nature. We're basically on what is called the 6th extinction. There's going to be a whole bunch of us surviving, but majority of the people is not it's not their gig. They're so addicted, their immune system so severely compromised. And you've seen, like, I don't know if you ever looked at it through my book on physiognomy. Basically, the genetic makeup of the humanoids is like they're walking examples of basically degeneration. I'm talking about facial features. Your earlobe, Chinese medicine have studied this over 5,000 years, and they've seen the results. And basically, long earlobes indicate strong liver and kidney. Wide nostrils, wide horizontally, indicate strong heart and lungs. And right now, you take a look at Facebook. You take a look at basically old high school yearbooks or college yearbooks, and you'll see 100 years ago or 80 years ago, people had everybody long earlobes. In my class, there was only in my group in the whole school in high school, there was only one person that was fat. I'm talking about fat. Right now, what do you have? 60%. I mean, they're all degenerates over there, completely, brought into an addictive relationship by designer drugs that are placed in all the processed foods. And basically, they're brought into a situation where they're completely addicted, compromised, and brain dead, which started with with the introduction of basically chlorides destroyed your friendly bacteria. Then fluorides destroyed your your
Viktoras,
prefrontal lobes.
How about we talk a little bit more about you specifically? So, how did you end up? You're a theoretical mathematician working in computing, and you were getting sick on this kind of modern diet. But how did you end up going towards raw foods and writing that book and meeting Ann Wigmore? Like, can we talk about that maybe a little bit?
Sure, be glad to. Basically, I followed the heart. Basically, in terms of the choices I made, I didn't give a damn what the world. It was painful and difficult, for me to make a transition. I started off as an electrical engineer. I was the top student all the way up through sixth semester, and then I told my mother I'm going to switch to theoretical mathematics. Because it'll give me the summers free to study and explore, because to me, freedom was everything. And it had to do with numerology and who I am as an individual. Every one of us are in a different trip on planet Earth. It took a lot for me to tell Mom, I'm switching. Oh my God, he's switching again. And then I ended up seeing that even with theoretical mathematics, I didn't have enough freedom. But then I got into the excitement of Ayn Rand philosophy, objectivism. I dived into something that was superlative, that was going to be the biggest force on planet Earth, which was basically computers. And right now we're seeing it as such. So I dived into that. It was an exciting adventure, but then I was called. I mean, I entered into at the age of 29 was a number 9 numerologically. That's all based on Pythagorean theory of numerology, which is kind of a shortcut to astrology. And basically, you enter into a time you wanted to serve humanity. So I ended up dropping out. Just it was like no brainer. And of course, what pushed it even further was my whole compromised body, and I looked around. I mean, I was 29, and other people 29. They were, majority that I could look around. They were healthy. So I decided, maybe there's something wrong with the way I'm living, and I gotta find out, because I'm dying rapidly. That was scary stuff. And when I dropped out, all of a sudden I started going back to my meditation, my time alone, and basically I saw an article in Parade magazine, Boston Globe, that was it had Twiggy, the world famous model, who was staying at Ann Wigmore's place, and they had a 4-page story. I said, oh my God, this sounds really radical, exciting, and I'm into radical. I'm into exciting. Oh my! So I ended up visiting Ann, and my food digested well. It was a simple meal, and then I told my company, I says, I need a sabbatical. I need to take time out, because so they gave me the sabbatical, and I left. And I ended up joining Ann. I took 3 weeks vacation there. Not a vacation, but as a client, and I was the only two clients, that's all she had. Basically, nobody was interested in what she was doing. But I saw nature was what was calling me. And had this wheatgrass, and she had some sprouts, things I didn't have any experience of. And I drank a little bit of wheatgrass, ate a little bit of the sprouts, and they were agreeable. I ate very little, but I felt pretty good. So I did a 3-week program, paid $180 for 3 weeks. Can you imagine that? Well, that was 50 years ago type of currency. And anyway, so from there, basically, Ann saw, I'm a workaholic. I love just service. And I was diving into it. So she said, well, would you like to stay with me? And she says, I can put you up. We can't have you sitting in the city. I didn't want to be in the city. I'm a country boy. She says, we have a farm, a 5-acre farm. So I ended up moving into the 5-acre farm and would commute every day, and I would work 12, 16, 18 hours a day. And basically the program was totally defective. I dropped 40 pounds, and we didn't know how to put on weights. I stayed for 2 years, and I looked like an anorexia poster child, basically 95 pounds at 6 foot. So, and I kept on believing in what I was doing. 2 years later, after working in the kitchen and experimenting with food preparations, I discovered the production of basically plant-based yogurts, namely predigestion of our tahini dressing by the airborne microbials. And I it tasted so good. The tahini was like greasy gook on your system. But once it's gone through fermentation, predigestion, now all of a sudden the protein became amino peptides, polypeptides, enzymes, and the starch was converted into some form of sugar, and the fat into essential fatty acids. All of a sudden, my body could grow, and I started gaining weight and lean muscle mass within a year's time. And of course, I went from tahini, experimenting with all kinds of other seeds. So I ended up basically gaining about 50 pounds in a year of lean muscle mass. So that was a major breakthrough. So I introduced the whole concept of plant-based dairy nutrition, and now it's a multi-billion-dollar industry. You see it, but not of the kind of caliber that I would like to see. That's not yet commercially been made feasible. You can do that at home.
Sorry, you're saying you sort of
Yes,
invented plant-based cheese in a sense?
Yes. Yeah, right now, airborne microbes will convert, I call it the Viktoras Lazarus effect, which is creating the dead into the living, because it totally becomes predigested by microbial. And this is exactly the activity that is going on within a healthy GI tract. A healthy GI tract has over 5,000 different microbial cultures when you have a variance of fiber in your dietary choices. Average American has less than 500 different microbes. If they do have a microbial environment, most of them have been sanitized through antibiotics and chlorinated water that they're consuming. So they're basically sterile and basically have dead zombies right now, to the point where, according to demographics, our children are going to expect it not to be outlived by the parents. But so you see a whole depopulation is just in the making in so many different ways of the earthly life that people have became addicted to and have lost contact with nature. And so our movement, and there's an excellent new, a British man released it, is in a process of cutting a deal with Netflix. It's going to be entitled, Eating into Extinction. Eating into Extinction. It's a documentary, and it's in 15 languages, and look, it should be available before Christmas. So it's something really, it just puts it all together. I worked with him in terms of, we spent 3 weeks together at Hippocrates, basically covering a lot of the essentials. So it's definitely going to make a major impact on already the plant-based nutrition has been already being more and more accepted by athletics but it's kind of junk food nutrition. It's not on the caliber where you're really working with whole foods. And Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine.org, PCRM.org, primarily showed that actually whole food, whole food, organic, plant-based nutrition is not only adequate in providing all the needed nutrients for health, but anything contrary to that is contrary to good health practices. And of course, in America, what are we living on? You know, our percentage of veganism is still kind of on the low end. And especially even the vegans who are living, they're more like, they're not on a whole food plant-based diet, they're on a junk food vegan diet. Yeah. And about 60% of the clients that come to Hippocrates are vegans. They're sick with incurable diseases, including Crohn's and other inflammatory conditions.
That's interesting. I didn't know it was that many. Can I ask you about so I get the picture here of how you ended up finding Ann Wigmore and everything and being part of that. The book, The Survival into the 21st Century, and in the 21st century, sorry, I believe that was a very successful book and was very influential in spreading the message of living foods. Can you talk about the process of writing that book, how it got published?
Yes.
Where did that take you and everything?
It's an interesting question, and absolutely, it's been an interesting journey in getting it out. Basically, it started off with lecturing at Ann Wigmore's. I didn't know really too much of anything when I started outside of the scene ministry and reading a few books by naturopaths and on veganism and stuff like that. So I tried to teach, but it was completely inadequate, and I felt stupid. So that's when I started basically going into the libraries and looking through biological abstracts, and I started discovering. And I'll just share one out of thousands of discoveries, like Dr. Kulikowski in 1972, Lancet Polish Medical Journal showed that by utilizing low protein alkaline diet, they were able to have practically 90% success recovery from leukemia, infantile leukemia, which is considered incurable. And I found many such little tidbits of discovery, but it was still a matter of putting it all together. So as I mentioned, that the fact that people were thinking about war against cancer, my experience was that basically cancer has served an important function. So one of the driving things that led me through the whole medical abstracts was to find a mechanism of action on both what creates cancer, how it acts in your system, and how to reverse it. And we have right now the highest rate of success, even with totally just Dr. Chinpo Kim, as an example, just introduced enzymatic, both with digestive supplements and also basically taking them on an empty stomach in order to digest the garbage that has gotten into your blood works through leaky gut syndromes and all kind of other conditions. And basically he had 79% recovery published in medical journal. So the enzymatic was definitely one of the contributors, but I put it all together. So for me, it was focus on many different things, and basically I ended up having, I had a couple feet of Xerox papers from the medical libraries that I was studying all that stuff, underlining, and it was preoccupation. But looking for the jewels, always for the essence that pushed the vegan approach, the raw food approach, the enzymatic approach. And I made all these kind of discoveries. And so I didn't have the money both even to put a book together, but I had a good friend. Her name was Hermine Hurlbut. She was a beautiful 60-year-old, and I was 30-ish, and we became quite, you might say, a couple, to put it mildly. And she assisted me in organizing my material, and ended up basically first I decided to publish as Love Your Body, because I thought, as I started reflecting on our culture, nobody loved their bodies. And so that book was teaching them people how to love their body through all kind of recipes and lifestyle improvements and a lot of inspirational quotes and artwork. So that was my first entry, and that provided me and I started putting the book together, and I chapter by chapter after I got the overall organization for it. But I didn't have a staff or anything. So I did my own typesetting. I did my own layout design. And I would work with Ann during the day. At night, I would go to printing shop and I would do typesetting. Like I hardly slept at all. And but it was all coming together, chapter by chapter. And eventually I had 64 pages. And one of our guests was the wife of Peter Max. And she and her daughter were at a Hippocrates Health Institute at that time, it was called, and I co-started it. And she said, you know what? Sis, why don't you put a book together and have Peter Max do the cover? I never thought about Peter Max. I mean, who am I? And nobody. Peter Max was with the Beatles, with Vishnu Devananda. He was like a high profile, individual.
Yeah.
But she gave me his phone number. I called him up. I brought 64 pages that was already typeset. I published actually, and he liked it. So he ended up giving me a first cover design. And I looked at it and I said, that's not exactly what I had in mind. She said, well, come over and look at my whole library of my artwork and just pick something out that comes anywhere close in the direction. So then we co-created the cover, and it was all in pen and ink. And he just put in numbers for each one of the colors. So 9 months later of printing my book, eventually the cover was printed and I was blown away. And I already ended up selling my book at $2 to $3. $2 to $3. It basically, I pre-sold 5,000 copies because I already started becoming quite an effective popular speaker. Totally this crazy vegan. Just continuously just pushed this whole idea of lecture at colleges everywhere. So, anyways, so the book came out. I mailed it out, and I didn't have any money for second printing. So after a while, my mother basically saw the possibilities and invested in me like $3,000, and I made the rest of it from Love Your Body, and then we printed. And after that, it became like I was doing print runs with as many as 25,000 at a time. So far, we sold about 750,000 copies, which is, was like the first book on holism. And it required on my part to put in order to popularize it, because you don't get anywhere by sitting on your butt and hoping to get clientele. Nowadays, it's much easier on the web and the level of communications and networking you can do. But in those days, you had to do like the Rolling Stones. You had to hit the road. So I would be on the road most of the time, driving and lecturing, giving presentations at wherever I could get invitations. Even got National Institute of Health, National Health Federation. I ended up having 8,000 people in my audience. That was a funny little story. I got up on stage over there and I got this whole mass of people, and I'm not prepared for any of this kind of stuff. And I meditated for before that, and then I get on stage and I don't say anything. I'm just kind of absorbing the vibes. And the people who organize this, they're getting ready 3 minutes later. I still haven't said anything. They're ready to pull me off stage. They're calling it stage fright. And then I started speaking. There was only one other guy, University of Chicago, who ended up getting a standing ovation. I ended up getting a ovation. Kind of downloaded the language that they needed to hear with, so that all of a sudden there was just crazy outbursts. When my book Survival came out, during that time, I was away for 3 weeks. I ended up I came back to the post office. I go to the post office and there's nothing in my P.O. box except a little note. Oh, I says, I must have not paid my dues or something like that. So I wait in line and go up there. And the guy says, come on in the back. We got something for you. They pull out 8 mailboxes. The size of 8 mail bags. Yeah. Those are huge canvas bags filled with letters to me. And it became like an outrageous success. Out of that, I ended up extrapolating a whole bunch of excellent writers that wrote about their lifestyles. It became Life in the 21st Century. That became another book that ended up coming out very soon. And then I started doing Sprout for the Love of Everybody and Lover's Diet, from longevity to physical immortality. Just kept on, diving deeper and deeper. So anyways, survival was kind of a godsend. I just, like I said, I surrendered. Matter of fact, the surrender was when I joined Ann Wigmore. I says, divine source, use me. Let me be the hands, feet, and action on planet Earth to create some saneness on nutrition and healing, and put a new perspective on it, because I saw nonstop contradictions and battles going on between all the different groups. And that included, like, we went to a vegan conference and there were over 50 different approaches. People were saying, we go to these vegan conferences to get clarity. Instead, we leave more confused than ever.
Right.
I said, well, wait 50 years and you'll find out which systems are working or not.
So how would you describe your diet? Has it changed over the years, and what's your kind of
your
typical
it
diet
depends on what. Well, it depends on what is available, and like right now I'm living in the tropics, so basically I don't have variety of seeds for germination, so I have sprouted lentils. That's the only thing. We have all kind of microgreens, greens, celery, cucumbers, zucchini, everything. I mean, organically, it's over 50 different organic farms that we have access to. So it's all very green and everything else like that. And we have also local non-chemicalized fruits. So basically, I generally have one meal that will be papaya, mango, if available, seasonal issues, and papaya, mango, quadrados, which are four-sided bananas. I have it growing on my property, both papayas and mangoes and quadrados, and a whole bunch of other fruit that comes in a variance. So one meal of fruit usually with a protein, which would be seed cheeses that I make that are extremely delicious. So most of it is the fruit salad, and I try not to eat more than 2, at most 3 cups in size the meal, if you blend it or put it all together, because anything beyond that is compromising not only your digestion but also flooding you with possibilities of yeast-like infestations that lead to proliferation of alcoholic beverages, which is not at all uncommon among many individuals who are consuming sweet things. So primarily, and then green juices, watermelon juice, and then distilled water with Himalayan sea salt, a little bit added in. And then I have evening, I'll have greens of all sorts, sometimes, and again, basically some kind of ferment. And I still use dehydrated food that I've been inventing all kind of dehydrated crackers, breads, just a wide array of delightful little things that, in small little additions that just makes it a complete program. So it's been good, and it's been, and I've been athletically in my advanced age. Like at 80, I did just in terms of I did 80 push-ups all in a row, and then a couple weeks later, I did 400 push-ups in sets of 50, and presently I'm 83, and very flexible in terms of yoga. I'll be releasing Youth in Yoga, which is it involves all kind of engagements. It's kind of a vinyasa flow with Ashtanga Kundalini yoga style, involving also isometrics, kinetic and kinetic isometrics, as well as kinesiology, acupressure, self-massage. So it's a very rejuvenating type of workout. It's about 90 minutes long, and I work out every day and I take certain supplements, which is enzymes. I take blue-green algae. These are mostly my most important. And then I consume fermented foods that I grow, whether it's kimchi, but not much. No, like people who go around consuming these beverages like kombucha. I mean, they're consuming 1, 2, 3 cups. They're so acidifying their system. Eventually, it'll knock them over because of acidification. 2 ounces is more than enough per day, or even the fermented sauerkraut as an example. 1 tablespoon is about what most people can handle. Anything beyond it, according to kinesiology testing, just weakens your whole system and where borderline compromised individuals, they end up basically moving into pain and migraines and precipitation of acid crystals in their acupuncture point meridians. So it's a whole cascading. So it's but that's I'm like when I'm at Hippocrates, it's all sproutarian, microgreens and green juices and like sprouted just for one day, buckwheat, quinoa. So for more higher protein intake, they make very delicious cereals with almond milk or buckwheat milk. So these are, wherever I am, I quite adapt itself. Or if it's unacceptable food, I just fast, because eating is not that, it's kind of overrated. In other words, it's much better to feel healthy and conscious and have instead of compromising yourself with the existing delicacies that can tempt people, because they still need numbing effect from food.
How many years do you think you've been vegan?
Over 50 years.
Oh wow. Yeah. So yeah, well, that's you've obviously been doing this a long time, and I think that what I was wanting to maybe go on to talking about is a little bit about your retreat center that you have and what it is you do there. And do you still run retreats and things that people can come and learn from you, or stay with you for time?
Yeah, yes, sir. I don't. We used to have bigger groups, like we'd have 20. I'm not into a huge overexposure and over demand, so we do a few of them a year. Just right now, I finished up with 4 Lithuanian ladies that were between 40 and 52 from Chicago, and we had the greatest time. I was teaching them coaching, training them in coaching on youthing. I call it youthing with enzymatic systems. So how to upgrade people's lives in such a way that you have an ongoing, continuous improvements with minimal cleansing effects, so that it's very manageable, and people gain confidence and trust and all that. So I have another group coming in today. Matter of fact, in a couple hours. It's only 2 people from Paris, and basically their chef there, and he's opening up a retreat center in Nicaragua. So I'm training him on self-empowerment, leadership, and running a resort type of a thing. I already got him all the basic infrastructure support in terms of the kind of staffing that from Nicaragua that is available. So anyways, so I just I don't, I'm basically I'm more you might say I don't call it retirement, but basically on continued ongoing research in food technology, microbial cultures, and just also continued ongoing study. I spend 6 to 8 hours a day, basically just on the web with ongoing education from so many channels.
Yeah. So going back to the book, so the book was an incredible success and has reached so many people. And you obviously got a lot of invitations from that. You were speaking to huge audiences, as you were saying. where did your sort of career go on from there? Were you mostly speaking? Did you go into kind of coaching and teaching people? Was it um, running your own events? Like what has been the bulk of what you've been doing? Is it mostly writing and teaching and the Hippocrates Institute? Has that been the bulk of what you've been doing? Have you been involved in other things?
Well, at Hippocrates, right now, since pandemic, they discontinued the programs, which was a health educator training program. So I would be involved in those programs. We held them 3 times a year. So that was, and then the rest of the time I was spending here in Costa Rica. Then we ran earlier with my wife. She was a bodybuilder, belly dancer, yogini. We ran a women's festival, so it was entitled International Healing Arts Festival for Women. So we used to do that. I had a 100-acre property. I turned it over to an associate of mine, and 14 years ago moved to Costa Rica, the promised land. Anyways, at least at this time, but. So basically, I lived a life of a vagabond and researcher. I spent 2 years in Bahamas doing research with morbid obesity. These are individuals who were 400 to 1,000 pounds, and then
Oh, wow.
drug addiction, developing systems for getting people off basically a strong, cocaine, heroin, and stuff like that through basically simple natural interventions that they couldn't believe. No cramping, no headaches or anything, just basically, and then just 24-hour immersion through salt baths, and then putting them on an alkaline vegan nutrition, and they became total different human beings. So it's just beautiful,
Yeah.
So it's been like ongoing study with
Were you? Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Were you connected with like supplement companies and things like that? Did you
Oh yes.
have your own
I
company?
spent 25 years with in terms of, I was their consultant in product development with a company called Celtec, and they started off with a blue-green algae that would produce more than anything. Victor Coleman was developing, and it came out with impact on Alzheimer's disease. And I had a good chance to work on my grandmother who had Alzheimer's, and within 5 weeks she was able to come back to normalcy, but she refused to make dietary changes. I just put her on enzymes, digestion enzymes, a mild herbal laxative, and a cayenne supplement. And within 5 weeks, she became normalized, and she continued on for about 4 years and died from dietary toxemia, because, like I said, most people are so addicted to their foods, they'd rather die than to make changes. But supplements allow you to make major impact and progress, so that a person gets a chance to kind of detoxify, change, re-educate, become, you might say, a human being, and start becoming, more into reality. So so that was, then I worked with National Enzyme Company, which was Dr. Howell's company in enzymology. I got trained by him in terms of some product development and formulas. And then I joined the company, and we were able, in particular under my dictate, we went from 6 to about 120 employees. And then I ended up, they ended up becoming compromised. So I joined another company that was founded by one of the top 8 mountaineers of the world. He has climbed all the highest mountains in the world, and the fort and all the mountains in Colorado that are over 14,000 feet. So he was a student of mine, and he loved the book Don't Dine Without Enzymes. So he started his own company. Now it's the biggest enzyme company in the United States in terms of private label. So I definitely work in that field. And me and my partner, Lee, I keep his name private, but we've been working together for over 35 years. He lives in Hawaii, and I live in right
Yeah.
now. I used to live all over. So we basically, on a daily basis, keep seeing how we can influence the global situation by introducing concepts that can be very helpful, but they're slow to be received. Because, like I said, the nature of the controls, the propaganda, the mainstream mass media, as well as also the dictatorship of mind that is in the field of natural medicine that exists. But things are changing in a beneficial way. I feel very positive. At the same time, question is who's going to survive this whole cataclysm.
You mentioned having bulimia for 15 years. When was
Yes,
that?
sir.
Was that, at what point was that? Was that before you?
No, that was after I got into veganism. I was a vegan bulimic, and basically I used to suppress. I mean, and this is not, by the way, it's quite uncommon among men, but it's very common among women, and basically it's because they're more sensitive emotionally. But I had just such a traumatized emotional experience. So there's a whole mechanism. Without going into details, I discovered how the brain overall works in relationship to sensory data and management information. I mean, so basically, I had emotional toxemia. My EQ, IQ, EQ, my emotional quotient, instead of being 60, 70 on the average, it was closer to 10, 20. That's why I didn't start speaking till I was, like I said, around 17. I started working my way into becoming, trying to communicate. And I was held back in school, as an idiot. And I discovered something that was most important. I discovered on my own what is called getting into that stillness. When I saw myself aging and I wasn't getting sleep, so I ended up discovering ways of instead of sleeping, relaxing my body and going into the savasana or the corpse pose. And with that, I went into chakra explorations, and all of a sudden my mind became its superpowers, especially when I was fasting. So I would fast and study. And then I didn't know anything about nutrition. When I go back to eating, I became an idiot. But so I still, that was just on intellectual, but I was filled with all these suppressed emotional experiences that were both circulating inside of my whole situation of body tissues that needed to be cleansed and detoxified. So whenever it cleaned up, instead of doing a raw vegan, as you're doing raw vegan, so all of a sudden I'm going crazy. I'm full of fear. I don't know. I'm panic attack. I don't know what the hell is going on. Nobody's there to explain anything like that to me. So I basically stuffed myself with big salads. I'd have a 20-inch salad bowl. If you can imagine a 20-inch salad bowl, you're just sitting and grazing like a cow. Your tummy blows up like crazy. Now that stuff is going through rot fermentation, and you're being poisoned. You're pushed into migraine. How the hell do you get rid of that? You vomit and vomit and vomit and then basically fast the rest of it. So I fasted basically for 15 years. The only thing that I took in was the sacrament of enzymes. I took in enzyme powder of Dr. Howell's, and that's what kept me from, and then the blue-green algae was introduced when I was in 1980, I don't know, sometimes in the 80s, 1980s, and that because we studies in algae, I mean, the impact it has on the brain is so phenomenal. It took form, and within 1 year, they became the top school going and have grades. And we took ADD, ADHD between left and right brain hemisphere, the impact of dementia, the impact on Alzheimer's disease. That stuff is so phenomenal. It's just like, and because of what it's composed of. So, all these little, everything integrated, it's all integration of everything. So I look at it, yes, I had bulimia. It was a life-death situation. I didn't know from day to day. It's like Nietzsche. I don't know if you ever read Nietzsche. Nietzsche was vegan who had digestive disorders. He says every time he sat down at a meal, he was wondering if he was going to come through it alive,
Oh,
because
wow.
when you got a lot of emotional stuff, it's like the food is, because when you're emotionally in a state of stress, guess what happens? You're in a fight flight mode. Your enzymology is totally turned off from the digestion. Instead, they're shoved into for metabolic activity, and namely giving you strong powers in arms, legs, and trunk instead of available for digestion. So the food rots, and then it poisons you. And unless you vomit it out or do something with it, you're going to be even in a worse situation. So it was a rough life in a sense. And I just
Yeah.
kept saying, oh, I'm fasting, and that was the truth. I was fasting, basically, just, and then all of a sudden, within 1 week, I became totally another person. My brain power just started again coming back, and no more addiction. I was, because it just helped me to start slowly dealing with, in an effective way, with this whole the ongoing detoxification. And the last stage was actually there's a excellent book. It's called Emotion Code, written by Nelson, and he ended up doing basically something kinesiology on me, working on my aura, on my and clearing the aura field, which still had remnants of terror. He said, after working with that level of kinesiology, I felt, no more fear of darkness, no more fear of anything. And then just another major lift of, trauma that was, people don't realize how compromised they are until their energy is on a free flow and they're connecting with the divine, and they're powered by, living alkaline nutrition, and instead of being anchored in a body that is a prison of sad suffering and, locked down on imagination. You're just living like a zombie. And majority of people, sad to say, there are different levels of incarnation. I came here to this planet as a volunteer to download God's evolutionary plan and to share it with the masses. Each one of us have a different mission statement. It's up to you to discover, who are you? Most people don't know, and they're afraid of knowing who they are. It's scary to become yourself. That's the first mission statement, and you ended up losing it because of the inculcation that you received by misinformation, by all the social dogma. 98% of the stuff you receive that is considered truth, it's actually about more likely to be the opposite, especially nutrition. Oh my God, the dead food, diet that is considered nutrition. 100% of all life forms live on enzymatic living foods. It's only the stupid humans and their pets and their domesticated animals that is causing, the havoc. 75 billion of animals that are moving to a slaughterhouse on a yearly basis. I mean, that's insanity. If I was an ET, coming down to planet Earth, let's say I stepped into an insane asylum. That's the way to look at it. You're lucky if you can get through the insanity, starting with your religion and starting with your politics, your psychiatry. It takes inner work. That's what it's all about. Connect with the source and extrapolate the jewels that have been left, a trail mark of many great minds that have contributed. But you got to be willing to seek that truth and to do whatever it takes. And basically, there's many of us who are truth seekers, including yourself. You're asking, questioning, and you're bringing, another level of awareness. This is my truth, how I discovered it, and I'm an explorer, continuously, looking at driven by one of the things that I was driven by the concept of, physical immortality, longevity, and stuff like that. And it's not that it's essential, but it's essential to have enough time on planet Earth to discover all the wonderful ventures, all the different possibilities that is part of your dharma, as one would say, who you are, your passion. So it's been a very wonderful journey, to put it mildly.
Thank you very much, Viktoras, and it's been really great that you've been able to spend some time with us today, and your answers have been so detailed and so full. So I appreciate you for going into so much detail and your personal stories and things.
And I do communicate through Vegan Victory 2020@gmail.com. People, you can give them my.
Sure. So to contact you, email address veganvictory@gmail.com. And you're also
Vegan Victory 2020. Vegan Victory 2020. That's when I feel we have really made the breakthrough, the year 2020. So it's Vegan Victory 2020@gmail.com.
Excellent. And you're also on Facebook there and Instagram if people want to follow you. So what would be your kind of final, if we just want to finish off, like your words of advice, words of wisdom for people in terms of trying to find their way to a healthier life, and maybe they want to encourage other people or share a message like you have, what would be your advice to everyone?
I think more than anything, I would put a great emphasis on the importance of meditation and in a corpse pose, laying down, meditation, getting into that stillness and inner guidance. That's number one. Secondly, eat less and eat lighter and have no snacking, because that's the most devastating thing you can be doing to your body. And thirdly, exercise, but don't overdo. Each person has to build up gradually, so the power of your whole physiology ends up changing. And also be fearless. There's nothing to fear. Mm-hmm. There's always we have a choice between love and fear, and choose love. And remember that everything that is going on is perfect. On planet Earth, it's like a compost heap going through a biological process, and basically you might not understand the details. It might be smelly, stinky, filled with maggots and all kind of undesirables, but the whole thing, it's part of divine manifestation and transformation that we are all as a human beings co-creating. And basically just enjoy the experience as you would a good movie that leaves you both transformed at the same time, not as a place of fear. So it's a beautiful journey, and become and get to know where your passion is and who you are and how you can be of service to humanity. But first, you got to love yourself, then you can love others with unlimited potential, because this is where we become handicapped by not learning the love of self. And underfeeding, eating whole foods is the way to go, organic.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much, Viktoras. I hope to stay in touch with you. And
thank you, my friend. I appreciate the invitation. It's been a great honor, and you are doing fantastic work by sharing goodness. One of the interesting books that I want to recommend is that you had Dr. Gabriel on your show. Well, he's one of them. Dr. Brian Clements is the other one. Then Fred Bishi is the third one. They're all doctors, and Reverend Viktoras is the fourth one. It's called Our Elders Speak. It's available on the web. Our Elders Speak. These represents 125 questions that people often inquire, and each person answers the 125 questions. So I think it'll be a good place for people to get some really with broad strokes from pretty intelligent human beings.
That's brilliant, Viktoras. Thank you so much. And I'll put your details below the video so people can get a link to your email address, your website, and everything else.
Excellent.
Thank you, everyone, for watching.
Love you guys in Britain. Stay strong.
Thank you so much, Viktoras. And everyone who's watching and listening this, please feel free to share this with others to support us in sharing this message. And you can subscribe at fruitfest.co.uk to stay in touch with everything we're doing. And thank you, everyone. And we'll see you in the next episode of the Love Fruit podcast. See you next time.
Satnam.